And one of the things that has changed, there are a lot of people like me who back during the Obama administration said, this is a direct quote in 2013, lobbing missiles into Syria without decapitating the regime strengthens both Assad and the mullahs. In other words, whatever you do has to have real impact. You can't do what Obama wanted to do and take a half-assed action and then hope that everything is going to be better. That doesn't work. And you can't hand over power to the Russian government, whose only interest is in continued propagation of the domination of Bashar Assad and the continued domination of the Iranian regime across the Middle East. And things have changed radically since 2013 because of a couple of the deals that the Obama administration cut. Remember, the situation in 2012, 2013 was a lot simpler. Russia was not running Syria at that point, and Iran was still under American sanction. Well, because of Barack Obama, Iran now has a lot of money to play with, and they have expanded their terrorism outreach all across the Middle East. Suddenly, there's a swath of territory all the way from Iran to Lebanon that is dominated by Iran. And that includes Syria. This is why Israel was the one that actually struck out yesterday at the targets in Syria. They've been striking out at targets in Syria, as I say, over 100 times they struck at targets in Syria since 2012, because Syria is being used as a thoroughfare for the world's worst weapons being put in the hands of terrorists, people like Hamas, people like Hezbollah. Yadlin Amos is a retired general in the Israeli army. He's the executive director of Tel Aviv University's Institute for National Security Studies, and he has a really interesting tweet thread about what happened last night when Israel apparently struck T4, which is a Syrian airbase. He said, the reported strike last night in T4, Syria is part of the two colliding vectors, Iranian determination to entrench itself in Syria and Israeli resolve to prevent it. This was the first reported airstrike since February 10th incidents. The colliding vectors were recognized months ago in the Israeli national security strategy, and Syrian and Iranian responses cannot be ruled out. The strike's timing drove Syria to first attribute it to the U.S. as a response to Assad's use of chemical weapons against civilians in Douma. However, the U.S. has denied responsibility, while the target hit is connected to Iran and not to chemical weapons. It is not from T4 Air Force Base that the CW dropping aircraft came, while reports of Iranian casualties are a strong testament. That being said, a strike may well serve two purposes, promoting two objectives in a single step, preventing Iranian entrenchment in Syria with advanced weaponry, and sending a moral message that using CW to commit mass murder is not acceptable. To that end, even if it does not take responsibility for the strike last night, it is important that Israel make its voice heard, denouncing the use of chemical weapons and their use in Syria awaits a U.S. and Western response, and one cannot rule out the possibility of a U.S. strike on regime targets. So here's what's happening. This has now become a grand strategic game. This is no longer a situation in which everything is contained. Okay, that's the reality of the situation in Syria right now. This is not a containable situation. Russia is involved. Iran is involved. This is now a proxy war about who is going to control this entire swath of land in the Middle East. That means Saudi Arabia is involved. It means Jordan is involved. It means Egypt is involved. It means Israel is involved. If World War III breaks out in Syria, World War III will break out because Barack Obama allowed Syria to become a tinderbox by pulling American troops out of Iraq, by allowing Iran to run roughshod through Iraq, and by allowing Iran to extend its domination all the way to Lebanon. So what exactly should we do? Well, we should do a couple of things. If we have the capacity, we should knock out as much of the Syrian Air Force as we possibly can. We should knock down as many of their anti-aircraft missiles as we possibly can. It's probably impossible to decapitate the regime with significant amounts of boots on the ground. Whatever we can do from the air, we should do from the air. And we should also ensure that there are safe havens for Syrian rebels and people who want to escape the Assad regime. And those should be protected by a coalition force led by the United States. The reason being that there have to be safe spaces for all of these Syrian refugees. Otherwise, they're just going to come into the West. Otherwise, they're just going to escape across the Mediterranean and into Europe, or they will come to the United States. And that is something that a lot of Trump supporters are not fond of either. So either they're going to stay there in safe places that we help set up, or they will be killed, or they will escape. But should we go in and make this a full-scale land war? Probably not. Probably not. Because again, what's America's interest here? America has two real interests. Chucking Russian ambitions? Well, three interests, okay? Humanitarian, but that exists all across the globe. Checking Russian interests in Syria. Russia wants to ensure that Bashar Assad and the Iranian regime retain power and gain power in that region, which makes it more likely that war breaks out. And stopping the growth of the Iranian regime. Israel and Saudi Arabia, by the way, are happy to take the lead here, right? Israel obviously is already taking the lead here. Israel isn't going to wait. So the fact that the United States can mobilize a commitment behind Israeli-led action in Syria would be a good thing. If we have allies who are willing to do this, there's no reason the United States should have to lead the way. But again, the U.S. is going to have to be involved. That means setting up these safer places for Syrian refugees to go. It means neutering the ability of the Assad regime to use chemical weapons. And it means preventing them from making more territorial encroachments into rebel-held areas. And that means providing actual armed support to whatever Syrian rebels are left who have not been murdered already by ISIS and the Assad regime, and arming those people who are left in order to resist the Assad regime. This now has implications far beyond the borders of Syria, and we are going to pay a price for it in terms of money and treasure and the possibility of additional terrorism and the spread of chemical weapons if we take a fully hands-off approach, as some of the more isolationist members of the Republican Party seem to be promoting.